Hey, it's your open source advocate and I'm back with another tutorial. Today I want to talk about Wireguard VPN. So VPN is a virtual private network. If you don't know what that is, basically when you're at home on your own internet, you're on your local area network or a private network because it's yours. Nobody else can really get into it as long as you have the right settings set up on your router, and usually they come that way by default. When you go out onto the internet, you're on a public network or a wide area network. So what a VPN does is it helps you create a local area network even though you're not at home. You can create a local area network with your home computers. Maybe your work offers a VPN so you can get on the work network even when you're not there, when you're working remotely. That's what I do a lot of times. So VPNs are really great, and they have some really great benefits because they encrypt your traffic, they protect your traffic, and they make it really easy for you to be secure on the internet. So just think when you go to Starbucks or McDonald's or a hotel or the airport and you get on their Wi-Fi, there's a lot of other people on the Wi-Fi and they do kind of the minimum to protect you from those other people. It's not really a great protection and they can peek at what you're looking at. So it's really important once you get on those things to start up a VPN so that you have some encrypted traffic. So today I want to talk about one that's pretty new. It's been out for a year or so, and it's called Wireguard. It can really help you make some really great connections back to your own network or through a secure server to look at the internet. Those connections can really help you with a lot of things like trying to maybe access Netflix from outside the country whenever you're working outside the country, or trying to access some other piece of software whenever you're remote. So the way you set this up is pretty straightforward, but I'm going to go through the terminal configuration first, and then I'm going to show you a nice UI that's been built on the server side that does a lot of this work for you. And I'll show you kind of how you set things up that way in the next video next week. So first I want to give you kind of the introduction of how you set this up manually. It's still not hard. Just understand that this is the manual way. Next week I'll go over the user interface way with a nice UI that's been built for Wireguard, and we'll kind of cover it that way. So first off, this is the Wireguard page, and I'll put the link in the show notes. There's a few pages up here that we'll talk about. So first I'm going to go to DigitalOcean and I'm going to create a droplet. So I need a server basically to host my Wireguard. You can do this at your home, but you have to do some network routing and things like that to make everything accessible from the internet. So I'd rather just start up a DigitalOcean droplet and use that as my server. So I'm going to click on Create Droplet. This is the virtual machine that they create for a server. So I'm just stay on Ubuntu 18.04. That's what we want. I'm going to stay standard here. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select a $5 droplet, and I'm not going to add any block storage. Pick the geographic location that's closest to you. In this case, I'll just leave it on New York. That's fine. I'm going to choose my SSH keys for this machine, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to name this droplet what I'm going to give it out there on the internet. So it should be vpn.opensourceisawesome.com. Everything looks okay there. I'm just going to scroll down and I'm going to click on Create Droplet. This is just going to take a few seconds here. We'll let the droplet get created. We'll get the IP address from it, and then we'll jump over here to hover on the DNS. So I'll add an A record, and I'm going to call this VPN, and then we'll put in the IP address we get from DigitalOcean. So we'll let this server finish getting created, and it's done. We'll just copy that IP, and then we're just going to paste that in here. And I'm going to ask it to update in 5 minutes. And that's running. You can see there it added VPN. So we'll go back over here to Wireguard, and I'm going to go to my terminal. I'm going to work with 2 terminals today. So I'm going to have this top one be my local machine, and this bottom one be my server machine. So we're going to SSH root at, and then I'm just going to paste in that IP address because it already has my keys. So I'm going to say yes, I want to access that server. And as always, we're going to update and upgrade the server first. So update, and then apt upgrade, and then I'll just give it the Y flag for yes, so it just goes through without prompting. We'll let that run. It'll just take a second. Now, if you're running this on a Linux server, this is how you do it. And then if you're running it on a Linux machine, you're going to do it in a very similar way. So I'll show you the way on the server. I've already installed it on my desktop here. So just understand that you have to go through kind of the same install steps to get WireGuard and the tools installed, regardless of what you're running it on. But once it's installed, it's very simple. For Mac, they have an app on the App Store for WireGuard. For iOS, they have an app on the App Store for WireGuard. I believe for Android, they also have one for WireGuard. And for Windows, I believe there's a WireGuard app. So as usual, Mac, Windows, iOS, they all get a nice little UI. Meanwhile, Linux is stuck with the terminal, but that's okay. I think in 1910, so I'm using 1804 here. I'm using 1910 on my desktop in the background. I actually think in 1910 we can do WireGuard from the Network Manager built into Linux, which is pretty cool. So if you're using Network Manager on one of the Ubuntu or Debian systems, you can do that. So as always, whenever this is going through the upgrade, it prompts about this. Just leave it on the default, hit tab till it highlights OK, and then one more time, and then it'll finish up the upgrade there. It did some kernel updates, so I'm going to reboot this server. That'll disconnect me, but that's okay because we'll reconnect here in just a second after we get about 20 seconds to reboot the server, and we'll reconnect using our subdomain. So we'll do SSH root at vpn.opensourceisawesome.com. We'll give it a few more seconds for the reboot, and then we'll just reconnect here. And yes. And we are into our server. So we have to do a few things to get ready and be ready to actually run this install. First thing we're going to do is add a repository. So we're going to do add-apt-repository ppa:/WireGuard/WireGuard. We're going to hit enter, and it's going to prompt. We'll just hit enter again to accept it. Then it's going to update. Now, even though it updates the packages, I always go ahead and do another update just to make sure that it went and got it. And then we have an install command here that we're going to use for WireGuard, and we need to get some tools and things like that. So I'm just going to copy this again, and I'm going to paste it in. So this is apt-get install WireGuard-DKMS. So that's the kernel module system. So what happens is WireGuard gets installed and it modifies the kernel a little bit to have this capability to make a VPN connection. So once you do this installation step, we're going to reboot the server again just to make sure all the kernel modules are updated and that the system is booted with the correct kernel module that we want. You also have the WireGuard tools that gives you some access to some of the commands we'll be using to do this, like wgquick and wg. And then finally, it checks the Linux headers for what we need for our version of Linux. So we're just going to run this. It's going to prompt us. We'll say yes, and it's going to run through that installation. So we'll give this just a minute to install. It'll update the kernel, and then we'll reboot, and we'll be ready to go. All right, we've finished updating. So now I'm going to go and actually just reboot the server. Again, that'll take about 20 seconds. It doesn't take very long for these servers to reboot, but you want to give it time to reboot and get the kernel module updated, and then you'll just reconnect. Alright, we've given it a little bit of time to reboot. We're going to reconnect. And we're on. Okay, we've installed our modules. Now we're going to run through a little process to generate some keys. This is very important. You have to do this on each client, and you have to do this on the server. Now again, this is Linux clients that I'm talking about. If you're doing this on Mac, if you're doing this, well, you actually have to do this no matter what, because you're going to create configuration files for each one. I'll kind of show you two ways to do that. You can do that from the server. To me, that's easier, and then you download that configuration file. But you can also do it on the clients. So for me, on the Linux clients, I just do it on those because the commands are the same no matter what. For the iOS devices, I create them on the server, and then I use a little application called QR Encode, which I use in the terminal, and that gives me a QR code that I can scan with the phone. So I'll show you how to do that too in a little bit. So first, we're going to do umask077. Then we're going to do WG, so that's WireGuard. Gen key pipe T. So basically, that T means like a fence post where you have a T joint. So it's going to go in two directions. So we're going to pipe out the information. And we're going to make private key, and then pipe wg gen key So that's where the T comes in at that second pipe. Greater than, not gen key, but pub key, sorry, key greater than public key. So now we should have two files, private key, public key, and we do. Next we're going to update our firewall, so we're going to say UFW status. So first just do that, see if it's inactive. Probably is, but if not, let's make sure that we've got access to get through on SSH, so we'll say UFW allow 22/TCP. So this is SSH port and TCP. Then we're going to do UFW allow, and this is the port we're going to use for WireGuard. So 51820, and that's UDP. So UFW allow 51820/UDP. And then we're going to do UFW enable. And it's going to warn us that if we do this, it could cut off our communication. So if you didn't do the port 22 step, as soon as you hit this, you're probably going to get cut off the system. So you should probably make sure you do that first. You should definitely make sure you do that first, actually. Then just hit yes. And now we can do UFW status again, and we can see that we have our ports set up and they're open and ready. So we're going to just clear the screen a little bit. So now we have to install a couple of other pieces of software here. So when you get connected, you initially want to just see if you can connect to the server, but eventually you want to also do some, for me, when I connect, I don't just want to connect to my machines at home or my server, but I also want to connect to the internet, and I want it to show that it's going through my WireGuard VPN. So the way WireGuard works is it creates a tunnel between two peers. And you can kind of give it some configurations that say any traffic between these two peers is encrypted, but any other traffic, like going to the internet, isn't going to be bothered. So it's not going to be encrypted. So I'll show you kind of how that works. So first we're going to set up the WireGuard configuration, and I'll show you kind of what it is. If we look at IP address list, you'll see here we have QLEN, and then down here we have ETH0. So this is LO, and then here's ETH0. So down here on ETH0 we can see what our public IP address is. That's great. We don't see any other things, so we're going to create one called WG0, so WireGuard 0. So I'm going to go to nano/etc/WireGuard. This is the folder. And then I'm going to create a file called wg0.conf.conf. I'm going to open with a square bracket. I'm going to type interface with a capital I and close the square bracket. I'm going to give it an address. And this is the address that I want it to have as part of my VPN, so part of my private network. So I'm going to call this 120.120.1. I'm going to give it 24. That's working out through the octets, how it works. Each one of these combinations is an octet. So this is actually 010, even though you don't show the 0, 120, 120, and then 001. So the system knows how to interpret this properly, but these are called an octet. So basically each digit in each of these three digits has a value assigned that adds up to 8. So you get, 32, 24, 16, and 8. So that's where this 24 comes from. It says here on this range, this is what I'm dealing with, and this is the IP address of this machine. Save config, and that needs to have a capital C equals true. So what this says is, once this is up and running, if a client connects, it's going to have some information that will be useful to this configuration file as a peer. It can add that and be saved as part of this file. So that's what this is doing. It's allowing some kind of auto config to happen in the background to some extent. Now we have some routing rules that we need to set up. So we're going to do post up equals. And I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's really long. And I don't want to mess it up. So I will put this also in the show notes so you'll have it. Now we'll go back through this real quick. So this is doing some specific things here. So it says post up. So after the interface is up, give an IP table rule. So add our IP table rule that we're going to have some exceptions made. So same thing here, add another rule, some exceptions made. And finally, forward my traffic through ETH0 on this machine. So you need to check your machine and see if it's ETH0. Mine was, but yours might be ELAN0 or WLAN0, just depending on where you're setting this up. So kind of know what your primary network adapter is for that machine, because that's what you want to put here. ETH0 may not work for you, so don't just copy this and expect it to work. If it doesn't, you may need to check that. So now we're going to do post down. So if the interface goes down, we want it to go back to its normal state so we can access it and not be cut off from it. So again, I'm going to copy and paste, but this is basically going to be the same thing, but -D in each place instead of -A to delete the rule. So here you can see all we did was put a -D in place of the -A, and now we have our post down rules as well. So these are important. This is what allows that traffic to be routed. Now what I'm going to show you first, I'm just going to do hashtag here to comment that line out. It's fine. We've got to set our listening port, and that's the 51820 that we set up earlier. Don't forget your equal signs. I always forget to put my equal signs. And then we need to set our private key that we did earlier. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go cat private key, and I'm going to copy it. You need everything, including the equal sign there. Then I'm going to go back into my nano, and I'm going to paste that private key in, and I'm going to save. So now I'm going to do wg quick. Now if you're not running as root, you have to do sudo wg quick up. So I want the interface to go up, wg0. So if you name this something different, you have to tell it what it is. So if you did mybestnetwork.conf, then do up mybestnetwork. So just understand, this is telling it to bring up the network interface wg0. So we can see that it tried to bring it up. So if we type wg, that will tell us kind of what's going on, and we can see that it's up and running. If we do wg show, same thing. So we can see that it's wg0. Here's the public key, private key is hidden. Here's the port that's listening to. Okay. So this thing's up and running. That's great. So I'm going to do wg quick down wg0 for a minute, and I'm going to go over to my client. So I've got my client. I've already got WireGuard installed on this one, but I'm not running as root, so I have to do some things under sudo. So we're going to do that. I'm going to set up the same thing. I have to set up a configuration file for this. I've already got one running for wg0, so what I'm going to do is call it wg1. Don't let that mess you up. It's just another interface name. So I'm going to do sudo nano /etc/wireguard/wg1.conf. And I'm going to do interface, just like before, private key, and I'll come back and fill that in a minute. I'm going to have to hide the private key from you guys because this is the private key that I use for this machine actually. After you do your private key, you do address. So what I want the address of this machine to be, 120.120.2/24. No problem. So this is really all that I need. So I'll show you. I can do Control O, Control X, sudo wg quick up wg1. Oh, it doesn't like my private key because I didn't fill it in. Let me go fill that in real quick. Alright, now we can try our command again, sudo wg quick up wg1, and you can see it comes up, so we can do sudo wg, and it's up and running. So now we do sudo wg quick down wg1, and if we do sudo wg, it's off again, and you can see up in the top it's disconnected. So that's good. The problem with that is it wasn't connected to anything, so we need to keep manipulating our file here. And we have to add a little bit more information. So I'm going to create this peer section on the client. So this will go to the server. We're going to put the public key of the server in. So we're going to switch down here. We're going to get the public key, and again copy the whole thing including the equal sign. We're going to put that in the client. We're going to give it this endpoint, which is the IP address of the server. So we can just go get that out of DigitalOcean. Now, for allowed IPs, we're just going to give it the server IP at first. And we're going to save our file. We're going to do our quick up again. And sudo wg. Oh, I couldn't find the endpoint. Let's see what I did wrong. Oh yeah, okay. I missed something big. When you put the IP or the name of your server, so I could put vpn.opensourceisawesome.com right there, you have to put the port number that it should be connecting on, which is 51820. So we'll save that and we'll do it again. And WG, and you can see it's connected. Now, we need to make sure our server's up. So it's not. So we're going to bring it up. We can just do WG quick up WG0, and it's up now. All right. Now if we bring this back down, then bring it back up. Okay. So we can see that there's still no peer information when we do WG, and there's a reason for that. So we need to do WG quick. So you can't edit the WG file, the WG0conf file, when it's running. So you need to bring it down. Check it, make sure it's down. Then you can do nano etc wireguard wg0.conf. So we need to add a peer section here. Peer, and we have to give it the public key of the client. So up here, we just do cat public key. We grab it, and again, everything including the equal sign. And we're going to paste it right in there. Allowed IPs, and we have to tell it what IP address this client is. So we made that 2. If you're doing IPv6, you have to put all the IPv6 stuff in. I'm just doing IPv4. That's what most people use these days. Feel free to look at the documentation for WireGuard for IPv6 information though. We don't enter the endpoint part here because that's what's going to get updated with that save config equals true. So we're going to save and close, and we'll bring the interface back up. And now you can see that it sees a peer. So there's a peer. We can test our peer, and it's connected. Now we can try to ping our server. So if we do IPADDR, we can see that we've got WG1. Here's the IP address. Now we're going to ping 10.120.120.1. That's our server. And we're getting results. Exactly what we want. Ping google.com. We're getting results. That's great. So you think, hey, I'm on my VPN, I'm able to get to the internet. You would think so, but that's not exactly right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a thing called ipchicken.com. Silly name, does something really cool. This is my IP address from my ISP. Please don't DNS attack me. But this is my IP address from my ISP. This tells me that this is what it's detecting on the internet right now. I want this to be the IP address of my DigitalOcean server my DigitalOcean server whenever I go to ipchicken.com. So I don't have everything quite set up the way that I need it set up yet. So there's a few more things I need to do on the server side and on the client side to kind of fix this up. So let's start with the server, and we're going to go back to my client. I'm going to take down my interface, just make sure it's down. Ooh, it's not. Sudo wg quick down wg1. Sudo wg helps if you pick the right interface when you do that. And now I'm going to take down my interface on my server. Sudo, let's see, wg quick down wg0. There we go. So I'm mistyping things, that's not helping. I'm going to clear that. We'll clear this just so we're working with some clean terminals here. So I need to install some stuff here. So I'm going to first do apt install open resolv, open resolve, no e. That's done. I'm also going to tell my server to start by using some system control commands. So we'll clear. So we're going to do systemctl space start space wg-quick at wg0. So we're telling wg-quick to start up the wg0 interface connection whenever the system starts. Now we're just going to enable that. So it's the same command, but instead of start, we're going to use enable. And it'll give us a little bit of information there, which is great. Now if we do wg, we'll see that it's up and running again. So we need to bring it back down so we can work on it. And then do wg, and it's down. Great. Now we're going to run a command to ask it to use IP packet forwarding. So this is basically what it says. Hey, whenever I go to my VPN and I run something, I want it to forward that information out to the internet and give it back to me. So I'm going to paste that. Nope. So I'm just going to copy that command, and I'm going to paste it here. So you can see I'm also doing IPv6 there. It's not something you have to do, but it's fine to do it. But it's basically saying take the IP forwarding, set it to 1, which is true, and the same way with 6, and then it's in this file here. So we're just going to hit enter, and that's done. As long as you don't get an error message, it should be fine. But you can check it with this command here, and it's sysctl space -- system. So when you run that, if you look down here towards the bottom, you'll see IP forward equals 1 and IPv6 forward equals 1. That's what we want. We're getting there. Now we're going to go back into our wg0.conf file. We'll just check it. It's still down. That's good. So we're going to say nano/etc wireguard. If you spell it right, it helps. And we're going to uncomment. Well, we're actually just, because it saved our config, it took out our post up and post down. That's okay. That's why I have it where I can copy and paste it. So we're going to copy post up, and we're going to paste that in, and then we're going to copy post down, and we're going to paste that in, and we're going to save it. Now we're going to go edit our client file. So we're going to do sudo nano etc wireguard wg1.com. Okay, we're inside of our client configuration file. We're going to make one more change to help this out. So I'm going to do DNS, and I'm going to use the open DNS server. So I'm going to do 208.67.222.222 and 208.67.220.220. We're going to save that and close it. Oh, I got to make one more change there. Down here under allowed IPs, earlier we only allowed our server. This is fine. If you just want to have access to the server and back and forth, that's great. You can add other peers, and you can add those specifically by doing this, by adding their IP each time. So you can add more peer sections, just like this. You would open the parenthesis, peer, give it the public key for that peer, give it the endpoint for that peer, give it the allowed IP address for that peer. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to access all of my peers and the internet all from a single entry. So I'm going to do 0.0.0.0/0. So this just kind of says all IPs are allowed. I'm going to save that. I'm going to close it. I'm going to test it. So we do sudo wg-quick up wg1. Didn't give me any errors. That's great. My other side is not up yet, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to take it back down. There we go. Just check it. Great. All right. So save this, and I'm going to do sudo wg-quick up wg0. It appears to be up. It says that it has the IP forwarding information set. Now I'm going to come back, and I'm going to bring my other system back up. So we'll do sudo wg-quick up wg1. Okay. Now can I ping my server? Yes. Okay. Can I ping Google? Yes. So that's good. I can get to server, I can get to Google. Let's go back to IP Chicken, and let's just see what it says my IP address is. There we go. Now it sees my IP address as my server. That's what I wanted. So now when I go and connect, my IP address looks like it's my server IP, and that's what we're after. So it is a lot to talk through, but really when you sit down and do it, it's not that much. And I will take all of my notes, I will put them in order, and I will put them in the show notes for you, so you can just take this and run with it if you want to. But it's really great. So I'll show you just to make sure that you understand. I'll go and actually turn off my client now. So sudo wg-quick down wg1, and then we'll just go refresh IP Chicken, and it's back to my home IP address, just like we expect. And you can see I'm disconnected up here from that particular Ethernet connection. Alright, so now how do we add more peers? Well, that's not really difficult, and I will show you exactly how to do it. So I'm going to go to my server. I'm going to clear this out. Now remember, we have to take down the configuration, or we have to take down the interface so that we can adjust the configuration. So we're going to say down wg0, test it, it's down. So now we can say nano etc wireguard wg0.conf. What we do is we add another peer. So peer. This is why it's manual. You're adding these things manually. Public key, which we will get in a minute. Allowed IPs 10.120.120.3/32. Endpoint is going to get filled in for us. Don't forget, on the server, the endpoint gets filled in for you. You don't have to fill it in yourself. So I'm going to save. I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to go create a new public key. So if you remember, we can look back at our history, if you can't remember the command, and we can actually see what did we use to create that key earlier. So we can just copy this command right here out of the history, and there's a way to run things into history by the number, but we need to modify it a little bit. So I'm going to say copy. I'm going to come back down here, and I'll paste it for you. Now I want to change this a little bit because I want this to be iPhone public key and iPhone private key, because I don't want to get rid of my private and public keys because I need those. So there we go. Now if I do ls, you see I have iPhone private key, iPhone public key, and then private key and public key. We want to keep private key and public key. In fact, it would be smart to say make a directory called keep these keys and move private key to keep these keys. Oops. What? There we go. There we go. So now if we do an ls, we see that we've got that folder, which is great. We don't want to lose those keys. We've got it there. So I'm going to cat my iPhone public key, which I need for my configuration file. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to say copy. And I'm going to go put it in right there. Save and exit. Now I have to create my configuration file for my phone. That's the other piece that's really important. So I'm going to do nano iPhone wg1.conf. Since we did wg1 and wg on the client a while ago, I'll just keep it with that. So iPhone wg1.conf. Now if you have more than one iPhone, you might want to give it better names than that. But we're going to do the same thing, interface. And you can actually just take your client interface information here. So we can say sudo, so let's just check it. It's down. And let's see, sudo nano etc wireguard /wg1.conf. Nope, I must have mistyped something. Oh yes, I didn't type WireGuard correctly. There we go. We can just take this and copy it, and then we just need to change a couple of really important things there. The IP address will be 3. The DNS is going to be the same. The public key for the server is the same. The endpoint for the server is the same, and the allowed IPs is the same. So all we need to do is change the private key and make sure we update the IP address. Say save it. I'm going to cat my iPhone. Oh, I already have it up above, so let's just copy it. Oops, remember we got to get everything including the equal sign. Oh no, that's the private key. We need the private key. Sorry, cat iPhone private key. So we got to get the private key. We're going to copy this guy. And then we're going to go back into our configuration and paste that in. We're going to save it and exit. Now we need one more piece of software on the server in order to make this useful. So we're going to do sudo, if you're not as root, if you are as root, apt install QR encode. And yes, we want to install it. Alright, so now we can do QR encode -- help, and you can kind of see what all can be done here. So we want to get a QR code, and we want to get it in UTF form. Alright, so we're going to use QR encode -t ANSIUTF8, the less than sign, and then we're going to give it just the path to our file. So in this case, it's right here in the same folder. So we're just going to type in iPhone-wg1.conf. So when we do this, it's going to make a QR code up on the screen. So I'm going to get my iPhone ready. I'm going to use an app called Tunsafe, Tunsafe. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to go over so I can add another code. So I want to set up my phone to do recording. So we're going to go into TunSafe. We're going to hit enter. We've got this QR code. I'm going to have to make the screen a little bit bigger. So let me drag it up, and then I'll extend it down. And then on the TunSafe app, you just tell it that you want to do it through a QR code. It's going to open up the camera, and it grabs it. And then it asks you to name that connection. We're going to save it and select it. And now I should be able to turn it on. It's not going to work. I'm going to go back and actually start up my server. So wg quick up wg 0. So if it ever hangs like that, your server may not be up and running. So now I'm going to turn it on, and it connects right away. And at the bottom, if you watch, there's an IP address. So it tells you what it sees as the public IP address. So when I turn this back off, you see it changes back to my home IP, and when I turn it back on, it goes back to my server IP, which is exactly what we want. So if I get out of that, I should be able to go to the internet, and let's see what I see here. We will go to Lubbock Lug. No problem. Now we can go back into TunSafe, turn it off, and we're all done. So we went into TunSafe, we turned it on, went to the internet, turned it back off. Everything's working as you expect. And all you had to do was create a config file on your server, turn that into a QR code, and scan it with your phone once. You do the same thing with iOS. You can go into Android, download that configuration file. You can go to your Mac and download that configuration file. You can go into Windows and download the configuration file. So it's really very easy, and I'll get a Mac and I'll record the screen and show you how that works, and then I'll see if I can do the same thing for Windows and give you an example of how that works as well. But they all work about the same way. So once you've set this up and you add those peers, it's really easy. So this is kind of the manual way to do this. In fact, maybe I won't do that with the manual way because you've seen it. This is how you do it for every single system you want to add at this point. You do the same process over and over. Now we want to actually go to the next step next time, and that'll be using a user interface that's running on top of the WireGuard stuff on the server. I think you'll really like that, so I hope you'll watch next time. If you enjoyed this, leave comments, like, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks.